Welcome back to Draft Utopia on Restream. We're going to preview the NHL division, Central Division, and we'll give you our NFL picks for Week 4. Chris Ransom, Joseph Potter over on TalkShoe. I'm going to start with the Utah Hockey Club. I hate the name Hockey Club. It goes back to the Washington football team. Some people actually like that name more than the Commanders, to be completely honest. But what's weird is because Alex Morello owned the legal rights to the Arizona Coyotes, NHL cannot use the historical data from the Arizona Coyotes, which means every ounce of data the last 10 years is irrelevant, even with players on that Coyotes team that are on this one. The data is irrelevant, apparently. So, Clayton Keller, Barrett Hayton, Schmaltz are your first line players. Clayton Keller's a good left winger, 2016 first round pick, still on the Coyotes. Dylan Guenther, 2021 first round pick. I had him at number 2 on my big board. He fell to 9. Coyotes gave him an 8-year extension this summer, and Logan Cooley improved on it. Had a really good Logan Cooley had a really good first year in the NHL. I'm looking at what Logan Cooley's done at the NHL level because I think Logan Cooley's rookie year was last year. Because I think he went back to Minnesota after he got drafted in the 22 NHL draft, which means this year was Logan Cooley's rookie year. This past season, and I mean, I liked Logan Cooley coming out of the NHL draft in 22. I thought Bill Armstrong, the GM, and his rookie year, he had 20 goals, 24 assists, 44 points as a rookie, but there were games where he's on the fourth line, games where he's on the third line, games where he's on the second line, games where he's on the first line. He's rotating throughout all 4 of the line combinations. I would put Cooley on the first line. I think his ceiling is much higher than Barrett Hayton's. But Barrett Hayton actually surprised in 22-23, 5th overall pick in the 2018 NHL draft. He surprised in 22-23. It took him 5 years to make the NHL. He surprised in 22-23. He missed most of last year with injuries. Third line, Lawson Krause, Kerfoot, Matt Maxwell, and then Michael Carcone, Kevin Stenlund, and Josh Doan, the son of Shane Doan, are on the fourth line. That's the forward group. Defensive group, Juuso Valimaki and Mikhail Sergachev are on the top line. Sean Dursey and Ian Cole are on the second line. And then you have Michael Kersling and Kolachinok on the third line. And Ian Cole and Sergachev played together in Tampa. I think that should be the top line pairing with Dursey and Valimaki. And they did trade for John Marino, but I think John Marino's on IR because I don't see him on the... Yeah, John Marino's injured. John Marino, because remember, Joey, they traded for John Marino and Sergachev at the NHL draft. Bill Armstrong, GM of the Utah Hockey Club, he was GM of the Arizona Coyotes before that. He traded for both of those defensemen with experience on the first line at the draft this past year. And, he also has, I don't like the goalie situation, but Connor Ingram, 23, 21, and 3, as a starter last year, 6 shutouts, career high 6 shutouts. He was a third-round pick by the Lightning in the 2016 draft. He got an opportunity to start with the Arizona Coyotes, and he was able to take the starting goalie job from Karel Vajek-Melkma, who sucked in 22-23. I didn't even realize he ended up taking the starting goalie. Ingram took the starting goalie job from him. I have Utah Hockey Club in last place in this division, but my friend Brian Sweet, who's a Dallas Stars writer over at Fansided, he believes Utah can be a top 3 team in the division. I think a few things have got to happen for Utah to be a top 3 team in this division. Barrett Hayton and Logan Cooley have to both dominate at center. Both of those two first, second line centers have to dominate, with the wingers Keller, Guenther, and Doan all performing like stars. I think that's a little too much to ask for right now. The defensemen have to click. Sergachev, John Marino, Valimaki, Ian Cole, Dursey. The defensemen have to click. They have to have chemistry with each other. And Connor Ingram's got to play like Connor Ingram of last year. He can't play like the goalie in 22-23 that just sucked and underperformed. And if the goaltending sucks, this is going to be the worst team in this division. And I just hate the fact that they're the Utah Hockey Club. I think they're a year away. Once they get a new team name, they bring Tisha Ginla, the son of Jerome Ginla, up to the NHL. I think they're going to be in a position to contend. They'll also have Dmitry Simashev, the sixth pick in the 2023 NHL draft, ready to compete for a roster next year too. So I think, and then they'll have Michael Hrabal, their second round pick. He had a really good freshman year at UMass. The big question with him was the goals against average. It was so high, Omaha Lancers in the USHL, but he was able to get that under control at UMass. And he was considered the biggest goalie in the 2023 NHL draft at 6'6", Michael Hrabal. So how those two develop, how Simashev and Hrabal develop, I think those two have got to develop and get to the NHL before the Utah Hockey Club becomes Stanley Cup contenders. But we'll see. We'll see how this team does, Joey. Right now, for me, they are number 8. I may have them too low. I may just hate the fact that they're the Utah Hockey Club, but regardless, they are number 8 for the Central Division. You have anything you want to say about the franchise formerly known as the Coyotes before I get to the Chicago Blackhawks? Because the projection for Connor Bedard this year is insane. Like, NHL.com's projection for Connor Bedard is too unrealistic for my liking. And I'm going to go on a rant about that. I think you'll probably have more to say about that than the Coyotes, if I'm being completely honest. Yeah. So Connor Bedard had 66 points as a rookie. Now, NHL.com is projecting his over-under at 85. Look, I think 70 to 80 points is on the table for Bedard in year 2, and I think 90 to 100 could be on the table for Bedard in year 3 next season. But 85 points, we're setting that as the over-under for this season. I think that's a little too high of a bar, because remember, Connor Bedard, he is an exceptional player. I'm not taking anything away from him, but the reason Crosby and McDavid got to the playoffs in year 2 is because those teams drafted in the top 5 before Crosby and McDavid arrived on Pittsburgh and Edmonton, and the talent to complement Crosby and McDavid was there at the time. Whereas Chicago, Blackhawks did a complete teardown, got rid of all their star players, did a complete teardown, lucked into the first pick of the NHL lottery, and ended up getting Connor Bedard. And there's just not the level of talent, because people don't realize Crosby had Letang, he had Malkin, he had Jordan Stahl, he had Fleury at goalie. And then you look at what Edmonton did around McDavid. They had Leon Draisaitl and McDavid both reached the NHL at the same point. They had Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, number 1 pick in 2011. Nail Yakupov was still on Edmonton. The 2012 number 1 pick wasn't considered a bust yet, but on the brink of becoming a bust. And they also had Taylor Hall, the number 1 pick of the 2010 NHL draft. So both Crosby and McDavid had much more talent around them entering year 2 when they took their teams to the playoffs than Bedard does. And I'll give Kyle Davidson some credit for going out getting some veteran wingers in free agency like Teuvo Teravainen, Tyler Bertuzzi. Both guys, Teravainen was a player that, when Davidson worked for Chicago before he became the GM, he used to be the limo driver for Teravainen. And they still have Taylor Hall, former Oilers number 1 pick that I mentioned. He enters year 2 of his contract with the Blackhawks. Kurashev and Lucas Reichel are on the second line. I think Chicago's top 6 is pretty good. But the back 6, you have Jason Dickinson, Nick Foligno, Ilya Mikheyev. That's not a good back 6. And then Craig Smith from the Dallas Stars, Ryan Donato, and Andres Athanasou, team captain on the Blackhawks, are on the 4th line. I think Chicago's 4th line's actually better than their 3rd line. I would put the 4th line wingers on the 3rd line with Dickinson. And that'd be a good 3rd line to have. But, I think Chicago, they're a year or 2 away at least. Alec Martinez, former Vegas Golden Knight, joined the Blackhawks on a 1-year deal. He complements Seth Jones. TJ Brody complements Alex Vlasic on the 2nd line. And then Connor Murphy and Kevin Korchinski are going to complement each other on the 3rd line. I do like the blue line a little bit more than a year ago with the additions they made in free agency. And Artyom Lashunov, the 2nd pick in the draft, he's in the AHL. He will develop in the AHL. And then you have Peter Mrazek and Laurent Brissot at goalie. And Drew Comesso had a really good rookie year in the AHL as a 2020 round pick. He had a really good rookie year in the AHL. He's going to be, while Mrazek plays out the final 2 years of his NHL contract, Comesso's going to be developing in the AHL. I think Comesso, once he gets the NL, the Blackhawks will have all the pieces to be a playoff team by 2026 or 2027. I don't think they're there yet. I think they're in the middle of a rebuild still, but they've drafted well under Kyle Davidson. I think Kyle Davidson and Ryan Poles are playing 3D chess with Chicago sports fans with the draft picks they've made. And I'd like to say Caleb Williams has had the same impact that Connor Bedard's had in the NHL, but I just can't say that about Caleb Williams yet. But I also think the 85-point projection, that's a little too unrealistic. I think 70 to 80 points is realistic. 85, setting that as the over-under, you're putting way too much pressure on the 19-year-old Bedard who enters year two. I do think he's going to be a good player, a really good player, but he doesn't have the supporting cast Crosby and McDavid had when they were entering their second years in the NHL. People need to put that into perspective, Joey, because I don't think a lot of people are putting that into perspective. If you're expecting 19-year-old Connor Bedard to get 85 points in year two, I think 70 to 80 is realistic. If he gets 85, I'll tip my hat to him. But the reality is the Blackhawks need a 100-point season from Bedard if they want this team to make the playoffs this season. I just don't think that's in the cards for the Blackhawks right now. I do think Bedard's going to have a great future in the NHL. He'll be one of the faces of the league in the next 2 to 3 years. But he's not there yet. And that's okay. But we got to be realistic about this. We can't have NHL.com's fantasy hockey division setting the over-under for Bedard at 85 points. That's too damn high. He had 66 last year, and he probably would have had 70 if he didn't miss a month with a fractured jaw. I do think he's one of the future ambassadors of the game, Joey, but I also think the 85 points for year two, that's a little bit too high of an over-under to set for the guy. I mean, Bedard doesn't have the pieces that McDavid and Crosby had when he entered year two. He has some good players around him. It's a good top six, but I don't think they're as good as the Oilers because the Oilers had all those top five. They had the number one pick 3 years in a row before they got McDavid in 2015. And they had a top 7 pick in the draft every year from 2010 to 2016. That's a big reason why Connor McDavid was able to take the Oilers to the playoffs in year two. Crosby had three other players drafted number one or number two overall complimenting him. And then he had Letang. That's a big reason why he was able to take the Penguins to the playoffs in year two and then the Stanley Cup in year three. And they crashed hard. Yeah, because they went from the 2001 Eastern Conference Finals to picking Marc-Andre Fleury first overall in 2003. They crashed hard when they fell, but then they were able to get Crosby, Malkin, Letang, and then they got, Jordan Staal, and they were able to complete the rebuild with those players. I do think Kyle Davidson can get this team to the playoffs as GM eventually, but it might take another year or two because Bedard doesn't have as many resources as Crosby or McDavid had when they first got into the league by their second years. Because Edmonton, they had top 7 draft picks every year from 2010 to 2016. And then McDavid takes them to the playoffs in 2016, 2017 in the second year. Crosby did the same thing. And I just don't think Bedard has the resources right now that those two had when they first entered the league. Because remember, Chicago, they got rid of Jonathan Taves, Patrick Kane, Alex DeBrincat. Their 2 best defensemen retired. They did a complete teardown and got lucky with that number 1 pick. Third worst record, but they ended up winning the lottery and getting Bedard. So they did a complete teardown. And if they hadn't gotten Bedard, or Celebrini, they would be screwed. They would be screwed, and Kyle Davidson will get the time he needs to turn this thing around. Getting that number 1 pick saved Kyle Davidson's job, but, there's still work to do in Chicago, but I think they're a few years away. This is going to surprise you, Joey, but I have the Winnipeg Jets at number 6. I know they made the playoffs last year, but their head coach, Rick Bowness, retired. And just looking at what you have Kyle Connor, Mark Scheifele, Gabriel Velarde. Those are your top 2 that's your top line. You have Ehlers, Namstnikov, Cole Perfetti, Mason Appleton, Nino Niederreiter, Adam Lowry on the third line, Rasmus Kupari, Alex Iafallo, Morgan Barron. I do love Winnipeg's forwards. I love their forwards and goaltending, but I hate their defense. Josh Morrissey, Neil Pionk, Dylan DeMello, Dylan Sandberg, Hayden Fleury, Colin Miller. These are guys that will perform in the regular season, but they will lay an egg come playoff time. And honestly, as much as I love Nikolaj Ehlers, he's never had more than 28 goals in a season. Colby Barlow, the left winger you took in the first round, 30 goals as a rookie in the OHL, 40 goals 2 years ago, 40 goals last year in his second year in the 08, 40 goals in his draft year, 40 goals in his plus after he got drafted. He's got 1 more OHL season. I would trade Ehlers for a defenseman and consider promoting Colby Barlow because I think Barlow could be Winnipeg's version of Wyatt Johnston in Dallas. He's just that consistent of a goal scorer. You don't have a number 1 defenseman. And look at all the teams that got to the second round of the playoffs last year. Dallas had Miro Heiskanen, a defenseman they drafted 3rd overall in 2017. Colorado had Cale Makar, a defenseman they took 4th overall in 2017. Vancouver had Quinn Hughes, a defenseman they took 7th overall in 2018. And Edmonton had Evan Bouchard, a defenseman they took 8th overall in 2018. Everybody had a superstar defenseman as their number 1 defenseman to take pressure off the goalie. Winnipeg doesn't have that. If you can trade Ehlers for a high-end defenseman, you should probably do it because I don't think Winnipeg's going to have the cap space to pay both Kyle Connor and Ehlers because Kyle Connor's a 2026 UFA when McDavid, Ehlers is a 2025 UFA. Cole Perfetti's an RFA. He hasn't been signed yet. Velarde's going to be an RFA next year. You've already paid Scheifele, your first line center. You paid your goalie, Hellebuyck, who won the Vezina. Those 2 are locked up. But, you're going to have limited cap space, and Canadian dollar's just not worth as much as the American dollar, which is why there's less appeal to stay in Canada after you get that 3-year rookie contract and then the 8-year contract extension once you earn it. There's less appeal to stay in Winnipeg compared to one of these tax-free states like Nevada or Texas or Tennessee or Florida, where there's no state income tax. There's less appeal. So Winnipeg very lucky to retain Scheifele and Hellebuyck, 2 players they drafted. And now they got to avoid a situation where they lose all their talent to free agency like the Calgary Flames. That's not going to be easy for Winnipeg. And Rick Bowness, their head coach, retired. And the other thing is, before they had Rick Bowness, they had Paul Maurice. They fired Paul Maurice. Paul Maurice, the Stanley Cup winning head coach of the Florida Panthers. Winnipeg had him. They got to the conference finals with him in 2018 when they lost to Vegas. They fired him, and he went to Florida and won a cup with the Panthers. So Winnipeg, Rick Bowness retires. They're kind of screwed right now. I love their goalie and their forwards, but their defense sucks. So even if they get back to the playoffs, they're going to be an early out once again because their blue line sucks. They literally have the worst blue line of any Western Conference team. That's how bad it is. But they were able to give their goalie and center 8-year extensions. Their first line center and their goalie 8-year extensions, but their blue line's awful. So, yeah, this is where things get interesting because I have the Minnesota Wild at 5 in the division. They were the first team with a thumbnail. The thumbnail for the Central Division. We have Kirill Kaprizov of the Minnesota Wild, Cale Makar of the Avalanche, and Miro Heiskanen of the Dallas Stars. We'll mention Colorado, Dallas at the end. I'm going to mention Minnesota, and then I'm going to get to St. Louis, but they have Kaprizov, a superstar left winger. They don't really have any other star players. I like what I saw from Marco Rossi, a 2020 first-round pick. I think he should be the first-line center with Kaprizov, but they're going to rotate Hartman, Eriksson, Ek, and Rossi on that top line. They're going to rotate those guys in lines 1 through 3 at center to try to remain unpredictable. They have Matt Zuccarello. They have Matt Boldy, Yakov Trenin, Liam Algren, their 22 first-round pick. They have a lot of depth, a lot more depth than you'd think. Brock Faber, he was the runner-up to Connor Bedard for Calder Rookie of the Year last year. Jonas Brodin, a 2011 first-round pick they drafted. He's still in the Wild. Jared Spurgeon, the team captain of Minnesota, he's still in the Wild. Jacob Middleton, they extended him before he hit the open market. And then they added Zach Bogosian from the Tampa Bay Lightning and Declan Chisholm. And they have other young defensemen in their prospect pool on the Iowa Wild, like Jet Wu, 2018 second-round pick. Ryan O'Rourke, 2020 second-round pick. Team captain. They have Carson Lambos, 2021 first-round pick. And they also have their goalie, Jesper Wallstedt, a 2021 first-round pick. They have guys in their prospect pool. I think the Wild are going to struggle this year, but they're going to rebound in 2025 once all those young guys come up. Because they're going to, not only will they have those young guys ready for the NHL, they will have a ton of cap space. They can go out and get good free agents. Whereas all the dead cap, this is the final year where all the dead cap from the bad decisions they've made, they got to pay a penalty for. And then next year they're free. So I think the Wild's future is very bright. They also have Zeev William, their 2024 first-round pick from the Denver Pioneers. So Minnesota's got a bright future, but I just don't think they're ready to make a playoff push yet. But if they get in, good for them. They'll have fun in the opening round. They'll probably lose to Colorado or Dallas or Nashville. I love Nashville this year. I'll explain why. But I have the Wild at number 5. At number 4, I have the St. Louis Blues. Blues are one of my wild cards, Joey. As hard as that is to believe, St. Louis Blues are a team. They've missed the playoffs for a few years now. They won the 2019 Stanley Cup, but they just haven't been the same team since then. And they have some good core players. Braden Shen, Robert Thomas, Jordan Kyrou, players they got in the NHL draft. Thomas, a 2017 first-round pick. They have Brandon Saad, Jake Neighbors, their 2020 first-round pick. Pavel Bunetvich, Dylan Holloway. They got Dylan Holloway in the trade with the Oilers. Yeah, the Oilers, they wanted to pay both Leon Draisaitl this year, and they wanted to have cap money to pay Connor McDavid next summer. So they traded they traded 2 of their first-round picks away to the Blues. Well, they didn't trade them away. It's just the Oilers didn't have the money to match the offer sheets the Blues made. So the Blues got Dylan Holloway, the Oilers' first-round pick, for nothing in return. And they also got Philip Broberg, the Oilers' 2019 first-round pick. Broberg and Holloway were both big pieces to the Oilers' Stanley Cup run last year on the back six at forward and the bottom pairing defenseman. Those were both big pieces that caught lightning in the bottle of the playoffs. Now they're on the Blues. Radek Fox of the Dallas Stars, fourth-line left winger and center, is now on the Blues. Zachary Dean, the Vegas Golden Knights 2021 first-round pick, now on the Blues as a fourth-line center. I mean, the Blues have been able to capitalize on some of these key additions they've made. Colton Parayko, they don't Torrey Krug, their leading point scoring defenseman, but they have Colton Parayko, Nick Leddy, Justin Falk still on the Blues. I think the Blues never should have signed Falk because they chose to give Justin Falk an 8-year contract off his time in Carolina over re-signing their longtime team captain Alex Pietrangelo, who's entering the final year of his deal. The thought process was, we can repeat if we give Justin Falk an 8-year deal, and they completely disregarded their team captain Alex Pietrangelo's contract. Probably should have gave him the 8-year extension instead. Now he's on Vegas, won a second Stanley Cup with the Golden Knights. But that was not good foresight by the Blues coming off a Stanley Cup win in 2019. They also added Ryan Sutter from the Dallas Stars and Matthew Kessel, their 2025th round pick. Going to gain some valuable NHL experience with Torrey Krug out for the season with a knee injury. I do have the Blues as my one of my wild card teams, but without Torrey Krug, this team could miss the playoffs and they could end up disappointing this year. But they are my number 4 team in this division, as hard as that is to believe, Joey. I really like what they did this offseason. They made some good additions. They picked up some core players, good role players from Edmonton and Dallas. I think they're going to put everything together and surprise people as a wild card. Don't think they're a top 3 team in the Central, but I think they're a wild card 1 or maybe even a wild card 2. I actually have them ahead of Vegas as my wild card 1. I have Vegas as my wild card 2, but we'll get to Vegas next week when we preview the Pacific Division. But yeah, the Blues, I think the Blues are going to have a bounce back year. Number 3 is actually Colorado. I have Nashville at 2. I'll explain why in a second, Joey, but Colorado's at number 3 for me right now because Gabriel Landeskog's still on IR, had 2 knee surgeries in 2 years. Kerm and I thought he was going to retire at his press conference. He said he's on pace to come back, but he's not projected to play early in the season. We're talking about a November, December return at the earliest. So Jonathan Drouin, Mikko Rantanen, Nate McKinnon, and they still have Valeri Nichushkin, but Nichushkin got suspended. He had to go into the NHL assistance program, and he's going to be out until January. I do like their second line. Colin Ritchie, their 2023 first-round pick, is going to be on the second line at right winger behind Mikko Rantanen. You have Casey Middlestad. You have Kivi Ranta, former Dallas Star. I do like their top 6. I like Ross Colton as a third-line center. I think the rest of the guys in the bottom 6, Miles Wood, Logan O'Connor, Kovalenko, Parker Kelly, Chris Wagner, they're too dependent on their top 6 unless they have Nichushkin and Landeskog back in this lineup. They're going to be dependent on that top 6. But I do think Kivi Ranta and Ritchie can be good role players in the third line when Nichushkin and Landeskog come back later in the season. I do think that, Joey. I'm not kidding when I say that. I do think those two can be good role players for the Avalanche down the road, but you're banking on those two coming back. I think Colorado's a 3 seed at best right now in this division, and I think everybody's got to be healthy. Nichushkin can't get suspended again, can't go to the NHL assistance program again, and Landeskog's got to be healthy. If Colorado wants to get another cup, those two things have to happen. And they have a good defense still. Cale Makar and Devin Taves are still in the top line. Josh Manson and Girard are still in the second line. They added Oliver Kylington and Eric Brandstrom to the third line. I do like those additions for Colorado. I think the blue line's still going to be a strength. But Alexander Georgiev had a hell of a year last year, and he's in a contract year. He is an unrestricted free agent at the end of the year. So is Mikko Rantanen. And Cale Makar's a 2027 UFA. I hate to say it, Joey, but if Colorado does not get a second cup this year, I think their Stanley Cup window is closed. They'll still be a playoff team, but I think their Stanley Cup window is over. But they got a cup in their window, so I'll give them that. But that's kind of the impression I get with the Avalanche, is that if they don't get another one this year, that's it. That's their window. Their window's closed. I don't know if Edmonton's window's closed. I feel like Edmonton, they've got one more year this year. Then they got to pay McDavid. They're paying Draisaitl 8 years, 14 million a year, and they're going to pay McDavid more than that, and that's just going to cripple their salary cap. Yeah, they might win. Edmonton might win the cup this year, but having to pay their top two centers 16, 14 million, $30 million, that is going to cripple their salary cap because NHL salary caps are much lower than NFL salary caps. So having to pay your two best centers $30 million combined, that is going to cripple Edmonton's salary cap down the road. Like, it just is. I mean, I'll get to Nashville and Dallas, though. Anything you want to say? It's going to down the road because I said it's going to. Because I didn't mean to say it just did. It's going to, though. It's going to, though. Yeah, because Draisaitl's gonna be making 14 million a year starting in 2025. Yeah, Draisaitl's gonna make 14 million a year starting in 2025. McDavid's probably gonna get 16 million in 2026, which means the Oilers are gonna have to pay 40. Yeah, that takes them from 49 million in 2026 to that takes them from 49 million in 2026 to 33 million. And there's other guys too, like Evan Bouchard, their RFA next year. Evan Bouchard's their best defenseman. He's making less money than Darnell Nurse, so he's going to cost at least 9.5 million. He might cost 10 million if the Oilers win the Cup next year. So that you're going to have to pay him, and that's going to count towards your 2025 salary cap because the Oilers only have $10 million for 2025. That's it because they paid Draisaitl a second line center 14 million a year. And I'm not saying Draisaitl doesn't deserve that money, but first line center, I can justify paying that much if they're that good. But a second line center, I can't justify that because Draisaitl, I think he had 0 points in the entire Stanley Cup against the Panthers until like game 5 or game 6. He had 0 points. You can't justify paying that guy 14 million. Yeah, and Stuart Skinner's a UFA. Stuart Skinner, Edmonton starting goalie, he's a 2026 UFA. 2017 third round pick. He's a UFA in 2026. So you're gonna have to pay him, Bouchard, and McDavid, and you're only gonna have $49 million to do that. So even if you pay those core guys, that probably takes you down to you're gonna have to pay Bouchard 10 million a year starting in 2026. If you give him a long-term deal, you're gonna have to pay him 9 or 10 million dollars. So that's gonna take you down from 33 to 24 million, and then you'll probably have to pay. I would think Skinner would make 7 or 8 million a year if Edmonton wins the cup. So that takes you down to 16 million. That takes you down from 49 million to 16 million, just paying those three guys. And that absolutely cripples the Oilers' outlook. But enough about the Oilers. We're going to get on to Nashville. I think I think Colorado's window's kind of passed. If they don't deliver another cup this year, I think their window closes, but their window's open for one more year, but it's going to be tough with how competitive the West is. But my number 2 team is the Nashville Predators. They went out, they gave Juicy Saros an 8-year contract. And they went out and they signed a bunch of good free agents. They signed the top 2 free agents, Jonathan Marchessault from the Vegas Golden Knights and Steven Stamkos, the longtime captain of the Tampa Bay Lightning. They signed both those players in free agency. They're going to be on the second line with Tommy Novak, and their first line of Forsberg, Ryan O'Reilly, Gustav Nyquist remains intact. Nashville is a really good top 6 at forward. Colton Sissons, last year's second line center, moves down to the third line. Luke Evangelista, Mark Jankowski are your third line players. And then the fourth line, Cole Smith, Michael McCarron, Parsonen. I don't like the fourth line, but Nashville's first 2 lines are so good that the guys who on the third line, they have experience in the second line, but they're better suited on the third line. I think Nashville's top 9 at forward is really good. And then they've got Roman Josi, Brady Skej, Dante Fabro, Alexander Carrier, Jeremy Lauzon, Luke Shen, and Spencer Stastny. Really good group of defensemen. They've got 7 good defensemen. And then they've got their starting goalie is Juicy Saros. They gave him an 8-year extension. It made their first round pick Yaroslav Askarov so angry that he demanded a trade. And he got traded to San Jose for a first round pick. And they got Scott Wedgwood, the Dallas Stars backup goalie, as their backup to Saros. And they've got 3 first-round picks next year. They've got the Vegas Golden Knights first-round pick, which they acquired from San Jose. They've got their own first-round pick, and they've got the Tampa Bay Lightning's first-round pick. So the Nashville Predators have 3 first-round picks in 2025. If they wanted to move up for a really good player, they could probably package those picks. So Nashville's in a really good spot, not only with youth, but with veterans and with draft capital. I think they're the challenger to the Dallas Stars. They have the goalie, they have the defense, they've got really good forwards. If Colorado had a healthy Landeskog, I would put them at number 2. They don't. I've got Nashville at number 2, Joey. I think Nashville is the main de facto challenger to the Dallas Stars this year in the Central Division. I mean, they had a terrific offseason. So for me, they're the number 2 team right now. They would beat out Colorado for that gig. And I mean, they got to the playoffs last year and lost to Vancouver in 6 games. I think they can get to the second round, but I don't know if they'll do it again. And then the Dallas Stars have already re-signed a bunch of core players for 2025. And the scary part is they still have $29 million to spend, but they're going to have to pay Wyatt Johnston, their leading goal scorer in the playoffs, their team captain, Jamie Benn, and their goalie, Jake Ottinger. They do have 29. They went from having $54 million to $29 million after re-signing core players. But, you know, if they can bring back all of those guys and stay under the cap for next year, you would have to think the Dallas Stars have just extended their Stanley Cup window by another year. Because I thought their cup window was going to end after this year initially, before I saw what they did in free agency and the draft. You said it was going to end after next season. You know, if Dallas can bring back Johnston, Benn, and Ottinger, their goalie, they're going to have a cup window until 2026 or 2027. Because the way they've drafted in the first round the last few years, they're the only team in the NHL that hit on their first round pick in 7 consecutive years. And their GM, Jim Nill, just won GM of the year for a second year in a row. And he's gotten Dallas to the Eastern Conference Finals 3 times since they went from drafting for size to drafting for skill, drafting for talent in 2017. So Robertson, Hintz, and Johnson are on the top line still. Duchesne, Sagan, Marchment. Duchesne's under contract till 2026. Sagan's under contract till 2027. I think Marchment's under contract till 2026 as well. Jamie Benn, 2025 free agent, team captain. Jim Nill's already came out and said who wants to bring back Benn, Johnston, and Ottinger. He just doesn't know what he's going to offer them or pay them yet. Maverick Bork isn't an RFA until 2026. Neither is Stan Koven, the 2021 second round pick and your 2020 first round pick. And then you have Evgeny Dodonov. He's in a contract year. You will have to replace him next year. Same with Sam Steele and Colin Blackwell. You'll have to get some fourth line guys. So basically, Dallas, if they want to win multiple Stanley Cups, they got to pay Johnson, Robertson, Ottinger, and then get some cheap fourth line guys in free agency unless they trust the prospects they've drafted. They added Matt Dumba, the guy who injured Pavelski is now on the Dallas Stars. Is that going to help this team get over the hump, or is that going to create friction in the locker room? Because Pavelski was a legend in Dallas before he retired, legend in San Jose too. But, you paid the guy who injured Pavelski in free agency after Pavelski retired. That might create some friction with some of the guys in this locker room, but it could also work out for Dallas if he plays up to his potential. And then you have Harley. He got a 2-year tender. Ilya Lyubushkin, you gave him a 3-year contract. He was on Toronto. Essel and Dell on a 5-year extension, which keeps him under contract through 2029 when Miro Heiskanen's a UFA on a team-friendly deal. And you also got Nils Lundqvist back. So Dallas, and they also have a lot of other good defensemen. They got a defenseman from the Red Wings that Jim Nill drafted on a 1-year deal during his time with the Red Wings. They got Leon Bixel, their 2022 first-round pick, a defenseman. He's 6'5", 235. He likes to knock people on their asses, but Dallas is being conservative with him. They're not rushing him up. They're being conservative with him. I'm wondering if that's going to backfire, but I think Bixel's going to be great for Dallas when he arrives. And then they've got Ottinger, and they signed Vancouver Canucks backup Casey DeSmith, former Penguins backup Casey DeSmith, as their backup to Ottinger. So, and they've still got $645,000 cap space for this year and $29 million for next year. So they've got the money to pay Ben, Ottinger, and Johnston without going over the cap. But Nill's waiting to see what the Bruins pay RFA Jeremy Swayman before making Ottinger an offer, because he wants to figure out what he has to pay his guys before extending this core. And I think that's smart. He has $29 million to work with, and if he can get all those guys, I think that is going to extend Dallas's Stanley Cup window till 2026 or maybe even 2027. I think the Dallas Stars, they're the best team in the Central Division. I think they'll be back in the conference finals. Question is, can they get by Edmonton? I will reveal that answer next week, Joey. But, we've been waiting for Dallas to break out multiple years now. They got to the conference finals. They lost to a better Vegas team in 22-23. This year, they were the 1 seed. And, they ended up hosting the conference finals, but losing to Edmonton because they couldn't do anything on special teams, and Edmonton's power play was just playing out of its mind. But Dylan Holloway, Broberg, Cody Ceci, some of those role players Edmonton had last year, Joey, they're gone. So Edmonton still has the Stars, but they don't have as many role players as they did. So is that going to matter in 24, 25? We're going to find out, but I'm not going to reveal whether I have Dallas or Edmonton winning the Stanley Cup until next week. But I do have Dallas in the conference finals for a 3rd year in a row. I mean, what Jim Nill's done. When I said Jim Nill makes Andrew Barry look like Steve Urkel, I meant it. And that's not a knock on Barry. Nill's just that good. Nill's just that good of a GM. I mean, he was the director of scouting for the Red Wings for like 15 years. And then he went to the Dallas Stars as the GM, and he took all the Red Wings scouts that were underpaid with him to Dallas. That's not a knock on Barry. Nill's just that good. But yeah, that will do it. What are your thoughts on the Central Division, Joey? I mean, we've covered every team. I mean, Lyubushkin was like a number 5 or number 6 defenseman on Toronto, and you're basically replacing him with Chris Tanev, because Tanev Jim Nill wanted to give Tanev a 2 or 3-year deal, but Toronto offered Tanev, their best shot blocker, who they got at the trade deadline, a 5-year deal. And Jim Nill knew he couldn't match that. And he knew Tanev was going to Toronto. So, and the thing is, Dallas was like the last team to sign any defenseman. All the defensemen came off the board in like the first 2 hours of free agency. All the defensemen got signed in the first 2 hours of free agency. And Dallas was like the last team to sign because Nill wanted to keep his draft picks under contract. That was his thought process. I want to keep my draft picks under contract without overpaying any of them. And because that was his thought process, and because he didn't pay any of his draft picks before free agency, Dallas basically settled for leftovers in free agency. That could end up working in their favor, but I can see why Joey's not as excited about Dallas this year compared to the last 2 seasons. But they're still the team to beat in this division. I think they could beat, Vancouver's going to be worse than they were last year. Vegas lost Chandler Stevenson and Mark Cheshaw. The Kings, Drew Doughty, their best defenseman, is having a surgery that's going to keep him out 10 to 14 weeks. So as long as Dallas avoids Edmonton, I think they're the team to beat in the Western Conference. And I think Dallas and Edmonton are probably the 2 best teams in the league. But I will reveal whether Dallas or Edmonton's the team to beat next week. And on that note, we're going to pivot into NFL predictions. So, yeah. I'm surprised you didn't say anything about Nashville. They had a really good offseason. It's cool. We're going to get into the NFL now. Steelers, Colts. I've got the Steelers winning. I had the Colts winning this game back in May. What's changed? It's very simple. The Colts, they don't have Kwity Paye. They don't have Kenny Moore. Colts don't have 2 of their top 3 corners in Juju Brents and Kenny Moore. Steelers are fully healthy outside of Fautanu and Jalen Warren and Alex Highsmith being injured. They're pretty much healthy for the most part. And I think that's going to be the difference. And Zach Frazier played out of his mind last week. He had a 95 pass blocking grade and a 93.7 run blocking grade. He played out of his mind in week 3 against the Chargers. And he's going to get a Colts team that has DeForest Buckner and Grover Stewart and Taven Bryan as the backup defensive tackle, a much harder team. The Chargers, they have an okay nose tackle, but they don't have a star nose tackle. The Colts have a lot more depth at defensive tackle and quality starters. So Frazier's going to be tested more in this game. And Fautanu, he's out for the regular season. So they started Dan Moore Jr. at left tackle and moved Broderick Jones back to right tackle after starting Broderick Jones the first 2 games at left tackle. So we're not going to see Jones and Fautanu at left tackle and right tackle again until the start of next season. I think that will hurt the Steelers in the long run, but right now, Steelers have a lot of momentum. Their defense is playing historically great, despite the injuries. Deshaun Elliott and Minkah Fitzpatrick might be the best safety tandem Pittsburgh's had since Troy Polamalu and Ryan Clark. That's how good their safeties are playing. TJ Watt's still amazing. Cam Hayward's still an Iron Man. They have a lot going for them. They've got Freiermuth and Darnell Washington. Najee Harris can be a bell cow even without Jalen Warren in the lineup. There's a lot to like about Pittsburgh. Cam Hayward, Keanu Benton, Ogunjobi as their starting defensive ends, starting defensive lineman. Nick Herbig's going to replace Highsmith. 2023 4th-round pick out of Wisconsin was a player at a second-round grade on. Marcus Golden retired, but you still have Peyton Wilson for depth at inside linebacker behind Patrick Queen and Landon Roberts. No injuries on the defensive side of the ball, despite Cameron Sutton being suspended. Okay, they do have an injury to Highsmith, which is a big loss, but Nick Herbig's a guy who was a sack artist at Wisconsin. I loved his college tape. I don't think he's going to be as bad as people are making him out to be. And look, the Steelers, they get the Colts the right time of the year, and they get the Cowboys without Parsons, and they get the Cowboys without Parsons, and yeah, the Giants. Cowboys beat the Giants on Thursday Night Football, Joey, but the Cowboys are losing both Minka Fitzpatrick and DeMarcus Lawrence for multiple weeks. So the Browns had to play those two without their best tackles, and the Steelers get the Cowboys without Parsons and Lawrence. Do you know how lucky that is? You know how lucky that is to get the Cowboys without those two at home? I mean, yeah, 9 pressures for Parsons and 8 for Lawrence against the Browns in week 1. And the Steelers don't have to play either of them in week 5. Yeah. They're probably going to be 5-0. And if they beat the Raiders in week 6, I have the Raiders beating the Steelers, but if they beat the Raiders, they're 6-0, and then they get the Jets and Giants at home before their bye week. So they could be 8-0 heading into their bye week. And then they get the Commanders on the road before they take on the AFC North. So I think the Steelers' best path to the playoffs is to start 9-0 before they play the AFC North. And then you only have to win 2 of your final 8 games against the AFC North, the Chiefs, and the Eagles. You just have to win 2 of those 8 games and you're in the playoffs at 11-6. I think that's the easiest path to the playoffs for the Steelers, and I think they know that. I think they know that if they don't start 8-0 or 9-0, they're probably not going to make the playoffs. They'll probably have a winning record, but they'll be on the outside looking in. Right now, I do have the Steelers and Bengals both at 10-7, and the Bengals are the team that won the tiebreaker, but it's still early. Um, we'll see what happens because the Steelers are playing like the third best team in the AFC behind the Chiefs and Bills. And you can make an argument that with how sloppy the Chiefs have been, they're the number 2 team in the conference behind the Bills. You could definitely make that argument if you're a Steeler fan. You will not get any rebuttal from me or Joey when it comes to that argument, but Steelers just never have beaten Mahomes in the regular season or the playoffs, so I'm not going to give them the benefit of the doubt for that right now. I'm not saying they can't beat them, they just haven't historically. I mean, but at this point, the Steeler teams of old were able to beat Brady. They haven't beat Mahomes ever. I mean, I'll admit the Patriots did beat the Steelers in the playoffs, but at least the Steelers were able to beat the Patriots in the regular season when they had Brady. You can't really say that about this Steeler team. They haven't been able to beat Mahomes ever. So, Tom Brady, you're not giving Tom Brady his credit. Tom Brady beat Mahomes twice in the playoffs. Burrow beat him once. And it was, yeah, doesn't matter. Brady's still beat. We're talking when you say Burrow's the only person to beat Mahomes, you need to specify and say Burrow's the only active player in the league to beat Mahomes, not the only ever player to beat Mahomes. Brady beat Mahomes in the playoffs in the AFC title his rookie year and in the Super Bowl against Tampa. It was 31-9. It's a very forgettable Super Bowl where the Buccaneers beat the Chiefs 31-9. I'll admit it was a forgettable Super Bowl to watch as a fan. I'll admit that, but it still happened. I thought Brady did a pretty good job calling the Ravens Cowboys game. That was his best game. He sucked in the Cowboys Browns game. I'll admit his commentary in the first game kind of sucked. He got better in the second game. I thought his game against the Cowboys Ravens game, that was his best game of the year. Look, we agree he was brutal in the Browns Cowboys game. Yeah, I've got the Steelers beating the Colts 13-10. Steelers are a lock on the site. But I do think the best path for them to make the playoffs, Joey, is they go 8-0, 9-0 before they play the AFC North, and they just have to win 2 games against the Chiefs, Eagles, or the AFC North division, you know? And if you can beat the Bengals and Browns at home, you're 11-6 and you're in. That's the easiest path to the playoffs for the Steelers. I know I have the Ravens sweeping the Steelers, but the Steelers are the one team that's been Lamar Jackson's kryptonite from a historical basis. Um, Flowers has made a little bit of a jump, but the rest of the guys haven't. Bateman's been the same. And when I say a little bit, I mean a minor improvement, not like a massive jump or a moderate jump, which is probably what Joey's referring to. I mean a slight speed bump and an improvement. Yeah. Saints, Falcons. Um, I've got the Falcons winning, but both these teams are Gary is the pick'em leader entering the week. He has a 2-game lead. Kerm, Bannell, Matt Bowen, and Kayla are all 30-18. They're in the top 5. Wes is number 6. Eric Moody of ESPN and Cody Vanderhoven, one of Thomas Coburn's friends, who's a Buccaneers fan, and Jason's grandma, all 29-19 on the year, tied for 6th in the country. And then number 10. So everybody's competing. Okay, everybody at Draft Utopia is competing for position. I'll give Gary credit for his 2 games, but everybody's competing for position. Kerman Bannell are competing for number 2 in the country. Wes is competing for number 6 in the country. Tracy Porter's competing for number 10 in the country. I am competing for number 15 in the country. You are actually competing for the final spot in the top 20. As bad as you've been this year, you are tied for the final spot in the top 20 right now. You are tied with Heath Berman, one of Jason's fantasy friends, Riley, another one of Jason Bannell's fantasy friends, Stefania Bell of ESPN, Dan Graziano of ESPN, DraftKings, and FanDuel. You were tied with them for the number 20 spot in the country. Warren's 23-25. He has, yeah, you're not in last in the site. Chin up. Okay, I probably put my chin up on the live stream, but yeah. Saints, Falcons, both these teams have injuries at center. Eric McCoy is on injured reserve, and so is Drew Dahlman, the Falcons center. Saints don't have Cesar Ruiz at right guard. The Falcons, they also don't have Lucas Patrick at left guard. He's been out the last 3 weeks now. So the entire Saints interior offensive line is banged up. A.T. Perry's going to be out for this game, so it's going to be Shaheed moving from the slot to the number 2 receiver, and Cedric Wilson Jr. is going to be the slot receiver in this game. Falcons are not going to have Caleb McGarry at right tackle. And I basically said if the Falcons have any injuries in the offensive line, they are going to suck because they lack the depth on the interior. They have like 4 undrafted players as backup offensive linemen. This was the same problem the Vikings had last year, Joey, when Cousins couldn't make the playoffs and he got injured midseason. Same exact problem. And Dahlman on IR. But here's the thing: the Falcons have a much favorable strength of schedule compared to the Saints. I'll break this down a little bit further before I reveal why I picked the Falcons to win, and then you can rebuttal and reveal why I picked the Saints to win. But look at the Saints' schedule. They don't have any of their interior linemen this week. They're not going to have Eric McCoy, their star center, when they play the Chiefs and Chris Jones on Monday Night Football. They're not going to have Eric McCoy when they host the Buccaneers in Week 6. Vita Vea should be back by Week 6. They're not going to have their star center when they take on Sean Payton and the Denver Broncos on Thursday Night Football. That is extremely problematic for the Saints. This might be the beginning of a lengthy losing streak after a super hot start. Whereas the Falcons, they get the Saints at home, the Buccaneers at home, they get the Panthers on the road, and they get Seattle at home. I do have Seattle beating Atlanta because without Drew Dahlman in the lineup, Seattle has a really good interior defensive line. And without Drew Dahlman at center, that interior defensive line is going to be able to get pressure on Cousins and make the pocket collapse. So I had Atlanta winning that game in May. I have Seattle winning that game now, but it's a home game for Atlanta. It's a much easier game to win. So, it's going to get interesting, but I think Atlanta, their strength of schedule during this stretch without Drew Dahlman, it's easier than New Orleans' strength of schedule without Eric McCoy at center. And with that entire starting interior offensive line injured, Joey, that's only going to make things easier for Grady Jarrett and Chris Jones. They are going to feast the next 2 weeks when it comes to pressuring Derek Carr. They are going to feast, let me tell you. I've got the Falcons winning this game. I think it's going to be a defensive game. I've got the under. I had the Steelers winning 13-10. I took the under. I've got the Falcons winning 24-19 by 5 points over the Saints. You and Wes were the only two that took the Saints. Oren picked the Falcons, even though it pained him. Oren did not feel good about picking the Falcons to beat his Saints. He took zero pleasure in that as a fan. But why don't you tell our audience why Oren Saints are going to win? Carr did not play elite against the Eagles, but that was the best defense he faced all year. That's the thing people got to realize. Yeah. Yeah. But this feels like a must-win game for both the Saints and the Falcons. Yeah. Yeah, who's officiating this game? I'm just kind of curious. Well, it's John Hussey. He's calling the game. Yeah, I don't know how I feel about that, but the Bengals play the Panthers. You and Oren both picked the Panthers. I took the Bengals. They're gonna have Amarius Mims is gonna be starting for Trent Brown. I think he's gonna do a lot better. Panthers really don't have an edge rusher that commands respect. I know the Bengals have played sloppy the first 3 weeks. Their defense was horrible in Monday Night Football, and Andy Dalton has rejuvenized, re-energized the Panthers. I get all that, but on paper, the Bengals are still the better team. They're due for a win. Chase Higgins, I think the Bengals are just going to dominate the Panthers in this one. Derek Brown's out for the year. Okay, maybe not dominate, but they're going to win by double digits. I've got the Bengals winning 27-17 over Carolina. If Burrow plays sloppy, Cincinnati's defense does shitty, and Andy Dalton continues what he did last week, that's really the only way the Panthers can win this game. The Bengals are injured at defensive tackle. Both Sheldon Rankins and BJ Hill are injured. That's a big reason why they haven't been able to stuff the run effectively, because Brandon Coleman did a great job neutralizing Trey Hendrickson in the Monday night game. And Sam Hubbard struggled in that game against Washington's right tackle, too. But yeah, Damian Lewis is out at left guard in week 4, and Robert Hunt's a game time decision at right guard for the Panthers. So if those two are out, the Panthers' interior offensive line is going to be just as bad as the Bengals' defensive tackles, unless the backups dominate in relief of the starters. But Chandler Zavaleta, a 2022 fourth round pick, I think is going to be starting in relief of Lewis. So we'll see how the Panthers do. Um, you and Oren both picked the Panthers to win. And I liked Bryce Young coming out of Alabama, but I rewatched the Black Quarterback documentary on Amazon Prime, and I was watching Michael Vick shake the hands of all the 2023 picks on draft day, where Anthony Richardson had this very deep masculine vocal tonality. CJ Stroud, he wasn't, his voice wasn't as deep as Richardson, but he had the right manners, and his voice wasn't to the point where it was completely feminine. It was masculine, but not overbearingly masculine, and he had good manners. And I think people saw that with Richardson. They saw that with Stroud. When Bryce Young spoke, I don't know what it was about Bryce Young. It didn't rub me the wrong way, but I didn't really see somebody. I didn't really see this confident man that was in control. I saw this. I saw this adolescent boy with a very kid-like vocal tonality, and I'm not sure if that was a red flag. I don't think there's anything wrong with Bryce Young. I think he's a good person, but I don't know. It just he didn't bring the same energy, the same confidence that Stroud and Richardson brought when shaking Michael Vick's hand on draft day. Maybe that should have been a cue not to draft him. Painting painting your nails might be a feminine trait and a masculine trait, but it's a trait he's passionate about and he owns that passion. So you're willing to look past the fact that it's a trait because of his passion. Plus, you have to step a lot outside of your comfort zone. You have to step a long ways out of your comfort zone to paint your nails if you're a guy. So, yeah. Yep. Yeah. That and the fact that Bryce Young won a Heisman the previous season. Not saying that he I think the fact that he won a Heisman his freshman redshirt year, that propelled him up to the number 1 spot. I'm not saying Bryce Young isn't confident, but he sounded more like a kid than a man, and I'm not sure if that's a red flag or a confidence issue. Yeah. We'll see what happens, but yeah, you and Orrin have the Panthers winning. Rams Bears. It's another game we disagree on. I took the Bears because they're the healthiest team on paper. That's not to say that the Rams can't win this game, but I think Caleb Williams, he's due to win a game at home. He did win his opener at home. He lost his 2 games on the road. Um, I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but I think he can get it done. He looked a lot better in the second half against the Colts. The Rams have a few corners in IR, including Demarius Williams. Um, they also don't have Darian Kendrick. They still have a lot of depth at corner. They could intercept, but the Bears are the healthiest team in the league right now. I'm going with the Bears by a field goal, 23-20. Tracy, Kerm, and Bantle all picked the Bears. US and Warren picked the Colts. And Chicago's only favored by 1. It's not like a big margin. They're not favored by a huge margin. Yeah. You picked it. The over under is 41.5, and most people are betting the under, which is why I'm betting the over. But I've got the Bears by a field goal. I think it's a 3 4 point game, regardless of how you spin this. We're in agreement on that, even though we disagree on who's going to win. Yeah. 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 And, you know, if Mike McCarthy gets fired, I know this is a little off topic before we get to Packers Viking. If Mike McCarthy gets fired midseason, the interim head coach for Dallas would be their assistant head coach and defensive backs coach, Al Harris, the former corner on the Eagles and Packers. I get more of a high energy guy vibe from Al Harris than I do Mike McCarthy. Am I crazy for thinking he could be this year's Antonio Pierce if McCarthy? I don't think Jerry Jones is going to fire McCarthy midseason. I don't. But if he did, and the Cowboys started 2-6, they lose to Pittsburgh, Detroit, San Francisco, Atlanta. They're 2-6. At that point, I just pull the trigger and give Al Harris a shot because if he can motivate and strategize like McCarthy, he's a better option than McCarthy because I think he's more of a high energy guy. He's a good motivator and a good strategist. It's just the clock management, and I just get the vibe he's not a high energy guy. Players don't really respond to him the way they respond to other high energy coaches in the league. Those are really, yeah, 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 yeah. But if they're 2-6, do you pull the trigger? I don't think Jones will, so I don't think it's relevant. But I just, yeah, but I don't. I would give that a 1% probability. That would only happen if Dallas is at 2 wins by week 14. That's not gonna He's not gonna do that. Yeah. Yep, and before we get to the Vikings-Packers game, I do have an NBA trade to report. Carl Anthony Towns was traded to the New York Knicks for, Julius Randle and Dante DiVincenzo. I don't know why in the hell the Timberwolves agreed to this trade. I I get it. I guess you're getting a shooting guard and a power forward for a small for a power forward that can play center, and the Knicks needed a center, but I really don't understand why the Timberwolves agreed to this trade. I think if they had just stuck with what they had, they'd be back conference finals. I'm not saying don't trade Towns, but that's a horrible return for Towns. I'm not saying don't trade Towns, but that's a horrible return for Towns because Randall just hasn't. And they got Rudy Gobert too. So Rudy Gobert is their center, Towns is their power forward. It's a great 1-2 punch, great combo. I don't understand why you're getting rid of that. You beat the Denver Nuggets in 7 games after trailing them by 24, 28 points in the 3rd quarter, and you came back and beat them, and you had home court against the Mavericks. I don't understand why you're doing any changes to your roster whatsoever. If you wanna draft some bench players to develop in the early rounds, fine. But as far as keeping your starting 5 when everybody on your team averaged over 10 points a game, you should be making 0 changes to your starting 5 whatsoever. None. And really, the only thing the Knicks have lacked for an NBA title contender is a center. They have lacked a good center for 5 years now, 6 years. Now you gave them your best big. Yeah, and you look at the Knicks starting five, it is Jalen Brunson, um Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby, Josh Hart, Carl Anthony Towns. All four players averaged 14 points a game or more last year. 14 and a half or more. So, you know, Knicks could be title contenders next year. The East just got a whole lot better. But back to the back to the Vikings and Packers. I am taking the Vikings to beat the Packers. We don't know if Jordan Love is playing. If he is, I've been instructed by Oren to flip his pick from Minnesota to Green Bay. I am taking the Vikings no matter what. I think one of the NFC teams will be 4-0. Whether it's Minnesota or Seattle remains to be seen. I don't see Seattle beating the Lions. I think the Vikings get to 4-0 and they beat the Packers in a very low scoring 17-16 game. Orton and West picked the Vikings. Everyone else took the Packers, regardless of whether Willis or Love ends up playing this game. But yeah, I've got the Vikings winning by a point. A point. Packers are only favored by 1.5. Jordan Addison is going to play, by the way. He's cleared to play from his injury. He's completely off the injury report. I agree. Yeah, definitely. Jaguars and Texans. Now, the Jaguars don't have Evan Ingram. They're not Ingram's out of the lineup. Again, the linebackers Foyesade Olakun and Devin Lloyd could both be out for this game. They're both game time decisions. I think the Texans are just going to run wild, like Hulkamania run wild in the Jaguars. The good news for you, Joey, is Jaguars tickets against the Colts are only $21. So if you're not working next week, you might be able to get tickets to that because they're that cheap right now because the Jaguars have started so bad. It's actually affordable to go watch Richardson and Lawrence. But yeah, I've got the Texans 23-19. Tony Mario said that Doug Peterson's on the hot seat, but I feel like it's too early to make that claim. But we're at the point where if he doesn't turn things around by the end of the season, he'll be on the hot seat in 2025. I and Zach Taylor's younger brother is just not as good as of a play caller as Zach Taylor. Yeah, I agree. It is going to be interesting, but everybody took the Texans at Draft Utopia. Broncos, Jets. I got the Jets winning this one. Now, Morgan Moses is going to be out. Olu Fashanu is going to make his first start at right tackle. He came in, played a few snaps at right tackle. I have the Jets winning a defensive game 21-10 over the Broncos. I mean, there's just too many stars in that Jets defense. Will McDonald, the fourth, is starting to look like a star, starting to look like the guy that the Senior Bowl hyped him up to be. 3 sacks against the Titans, I think he had 3 sacks against the Patriots, too. I think he's at 5 or 6 sacks on the year. He had 3 against the Titans. I think he had 2 against the Patriots after Jermaine Johnson. The second tore his Achilles. You got to count for him. You got to count for Quinn Williams. You got to account for Sauce Gardner. And look, Patrick Surtain the second's making $24 million a year after the Broncos extended him. So Sauce Gardner's probably going to get at least $25 million next year come contract time. So, yeah. What's more impressive about Surtain is none of the receivers Patrick Surtain is covering have had 30 receiving yards yet. None of them. He covered Metcalf, held him to 29, Pickens 29, and he held Mike Evans to 19. I think that trend ends this weekend when he plays a Garrett Wilson, but it's very impressive start. But go on. Yep. Eagles and Buccaneers. Both these teams have a lot of injuries. Devonta Smith and AJ Brown should be out this week. Lane Johnson's going to be out. That is the only reason I'm taking the Buccaneers. Eagles just have a ton of injuries on offense right now, despite how good their defense is. And the Buccaneers have some injuries themselves. Jalen McMillan's going to be out in week 4. The defensive line still banged up. Logan Hall healthy now, but Vita Vea and Cansey missed week 3. Vea might be back, but Cansey's going to miss his 4th week in a row. Antoine Winfield Jr. is going to be out for the 3rd week in a row. I even with the injuries to Tampa, they're less significant. I mean, not having Lane Johnson at right tackle or your top 2 receivers, Jalen Hurts looks very average without AJ Brown and Devonta Smith. I never thought I'd be saying that. He looks above average. He does not look like a Pro Bowl quarterback. He looks like an above average starter with that 87 potential grade that I gave him coming out of Oklahoma versus the Pro Bowl QB he showed he was during the Eagles Super Bowl run. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but it does put limitations in his game, at least until those guys come back. But Saquon Barkley's been playing out of his mind. There's only 3 players that have been featured on as the player of the game on Draft Utopia twice this year: J.K. Dobbins, Saquon Barkley, Josh Allen. So, and Josh Allen's the only 3-0 player on those teams that's 3-0. So Josh Allen would be the de facto MVP right now. But we'll get to that later when we talk Ravens Bills. But, you know, I'm going 20-19 Buccaneers over the Eagles in a defensive game. Spreads Eagles -1.5. Kerm, Wes, and Oren took the Eagles. You, Jason, and Tracy took the Bucks. I think this is an ugly defensive game, but Tampa does just enough to win. Baker could go off, but he hasn't shown the ability to go off yet. Well, he showed that against Detroit, and he showed that in Week 1 against Washington. But like Baker, you know, I want to see him dominate a really good defense. I think this is going to be a defensive game. I think both Hurts and Baker are going to make their fair share of mistakes, and the Buccaneers are going to make fewer mistakes, and they're going to win by a point. Luke Godecki is well, Tampa Bay's left guard got a season-ending injury in training camp. They got the backup right guard from the Eagles as their starting left guard, and he tore his Achilles in training camp. And their right tackle Luke Godecki's missed the last 2 games. So having that backup right tackle, having that backup left guard has hurt them. And you still got Graham Barton transitioning from to center in the NFL. He played left tackle at Duke. He's transitioning the interior, which is supposed to suit him better. So yeah, that's a big reason why they've struggled so far. They've got Cody Mock and they've got Tristan Wirfs, but those are the only two linemen that have stepped up this year for Tampa. And it's not at the point where it's problematic, but you're beginning to wonder when that's going to linger, if that's going to affect the Buccaneers psychologically moving forward. It's not where it's yeah, and last year the only two teams to keep their entire offensive line combinations from week 1 to the playoffs were the Buffalo Bills and the Buccaneers. That was a big reason why Baker was able to have a redemption year in Tampa. And this year it hasn't been the same, but they're still finding ways to win games despite that and despite a new offensive coordinator. Yeah. Yep. Commanders, Cardinals. I took the Cardinals. I think the Commanders are going to beat Cleveland in Week 5, but they're going to lose to Arizona in this game. And if they can beat Arizona, they might be 4-1 entering Week 6. Clellan Farrell's out for Washington. They did have an incredible game. I mean, 20. I even though Jane Daniels didn't throw for 300 yards, he's the first quarterback in NFL history to complete 90% of his passes as a rookie. That alone gets him cover photo as player of the game for the Monday night game against the Bengals. That alone gets him that achievement. So I did give him player of the game. I think I've handed out 4 rookies player of the game this year. Those 4 rookies: Marvin Harrison Jr. week 2 against the Rams, Malik Neighbors week 3 against the Browns, Zach Frazier, Pittsburgh Steelers second round center that you liked, week 3 against the Chargers, and then I went with the Broncos kicker, Will Lutz over Bo Nix. He had more points and he didn't miss a field goal or extra point, even though his long in that game was 43 yards. You can make the argument that I snubbed Bo Nix. Wasn't my intention, but Broncos scored 26 points. Will Lutz had 14 of those points. Bo Nix only had 12 of those points. Or 6 of those points if you count the well, he had a rushing and a passing touchdown, so he had 12 of those points. The kicker had 14. That's really splitting hairs when you think about it. And right now, our poll question we had a poll question that was 2-2 tied in May for Week 5 cover photo. It was Joe Burrow, and both Tracy and Tanya were campaigning hard for Jane Daniels. I thought it was crazy back in May to consider Jaden Daniels as a cover athlete, but the poll question I had for Week 5, who should be the cover athlete, is now tied. It was 3-2. I had the tiebreaker vote for Burrow, and I picked Burrow. But here's the thing: the Ravens and Bengals could both be 1-3 next week, and all somebody has to do is go to that poll question, scouting college football, and vote for Jane Daniels. And if they do that, I am required to change the cover photo from Joe Burrow to Jane Daniels. And Week 7's poll question, Christian McCaffrey was the cover athlete, but because of his injury, that poll question's now been changed to Jane Daniels. So we could get a pretty crazy scenario here, Joey, where Jane Daniels is the cover photo on Draft Utopia in Week 5 and in Week 7 if somebody votes for Jane Daniels to win that poll question over Burrow. I mean, we had Burrow on the cover for Week 17, but when Jalen Hurts got screwed out of Week 2, he decided, okay, since the Bengals host the Broncos in Week 17 and the Eagles host the Cowboys, we'll give Hurts Week 17. So, this is what I love about the poll questions, Joey, because you never know what you're going to get. And if somebody changes their vote to Jane Daniels, I am required. Yeah, so I'm going to see what the poll question is. We got three votes. Okay, so we had 3 votes for Jane Daniels, 3 votes for Burrow, 2 votes for Caleb Williams. The Panthers play the Bears in Week 5. uh, you know, here's the thing, though. If we put Caleb on the here's the thing. We have Jane Daniels already set to be on the cover in Week 7 when the Panthers play the Commanders. I don't want to put Jane on the cover twice in 3 weeks. We're going to put him on the cover. There's no disputing that. But I think we either have to go Anthony Richardson Week 7, Jane Daniels Week 5, or we go Caleb Williams Week 5 and we go Jane Daniels Week 7. And to give Caleb the cover photo before Jaden, that feels disrespectful to Jaden because he's more deserving right now. Not saying Caleb isn't deserving. I'm saying at this point in time, if we're voting for a cover athlete based on a poll question, Jaden's more deserving. Based on how he's performed, he's more deserving. He should be on the cover before Caleb. That's not a knock against Caleb. Jaden's played better than Caleb right now. That's all it is. And that's because I like Jaden. Do I like Jaden enough to put him on the cover twice in the span of 3 weeks? Not yet. But I do like him enough to put him on the cover once within the next 3 weeks. So this is going to create a problem unless the tie is broken. I'm going to put Burrow on the cover. We could put Caleb on the cover, but I'm not going to do that. We also have a vote for Cousins, but if I change my vote to Cousins, Jane Daniels wins the poll question. See, this is the dilemma. I can't win either way I spin this. I really can't. So, yeah, right now, Burrow and Jane Daniels are tied 3-3. So that is in Scouting College Football. It's a poll question from May 17th. But if you scroll down, I'll check 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So it's the 11th thing. If you scroll down, you see the poll question. Joey does vote for Jaden. I will be required to change that. If he doesn't, well, we're going with Burrow. But it's tied right now. But let's get back to Washington, Arizona. I'm going with Arizona. I do think the Commanders are going to beat the Browns next week, but I think Arizona wants it more this week. But Trey McBride's in concussion protocol. So if Washington can lock down Marvin Harrison Jr., this could be the game that decides Rookie of the Year. I've got Arizona winning a high scoring game, 30-20. Marvin Harrison Jr. has the only 100-yard game for a rookie wide receiver, so he would be number one for me. Jane Daniels does not have a 300-yard game on his resume yet, so he would be number three behind Zach Frazier. But we both know a center's not going to be nominated for Offensive Rookie of the Year. So even though Zach Frazier is a 95 in pass blocking and a 93.7 and a 95.7 in run blocking and pass blocking on PFF, we both know a center's not going to be nominated for Offensive Rookie of the Year. So we could just, yes. Jaden Daniels would be my third nominee behind Harrison Jr. and Zach Frazier. But because a center's not going to get picked, Jaden's automatically the de facto nominee number two. And some will argue he's the de facto number one. And that's fine. And Neighbors would be number 3. I like Neighbors, but he's number 4 behind, Harrison Jr., Frazier, and Daniels for me. He's my number 4 rookie right now, and because Frazier's not gonna be that Rookie of the Year finalist, it's probably gonna be, Daniels, Harrison Jr., and Neighbors if things hold up. Yeah. I'm going 30-20 though. I think it's going to be a high scoring game. The over under is 49.5. I think both the Cardinals and Commanders are at least going to get 50 points combined in Arizona, at least the bare minimum. At the very worst, this is going to be a 30-20 game. I think both teams could get in the 30s. I think this could be a 35-34 type shootout. I really do. I'm surprised the over under is 49.5. That's too low in my honest opinion. I think the over under should be at least at 50. One thing I do when picking my over-unders is I go on dimers.com because on Dimers, they give you the actual percentage of people betting the over and under. So if more people are betting the under than the over, I usually bet the over because that's what the sports books want in order to make their money. They don't always get it, but when they get it, they're able to make back some of the profits they lose whenever Vegas has a bad week. They're able to make back some of the profits they lose. So that's one of the things I pay a lot of attention to. So so a lot of people are taking the under in this game. I think it's like 54% or 53% are taking the under, expecting a defensive game in Arizona. That means we're getting offense. And neither yeah, because both yeah, Arizona should be a track meet. Kerm and I are the only ones taking the Cardinals. Everybody has the Commanders winning. There are 5 W's under Draft Utopia. It's like Jameis Winston eating the W. I know it's a grotesque image, but one, NFL fans can't get out of their heads. Patriots and 49ers. Verdarian Lowe is going to be out at left tackle. Caden Wallace actually did a nice job filling in at left tackle in week. You know, K, K, he did. He did a nice job filling in last week at that left tackle spot. He did a good job. So, you know, Caden Wallace did a good job filling in at left tackle for the Patriots. And yeah, I mean, that's really so. I mean, the Patriots, I think they might start Drake May in week 5. That's one rumor I've heard. And the person who's saying this is Albert Breer. Drake May might start soon because if the Dolphins are starting Skylar Thompson or Tim Boyle, you can roll Drake May out for that game and win. And that'll give Drake May a ton of confidence. Question is, how long will he sustain that confidence with this horrid offensive line? That's really the question. And Wallace did a decent job at left tackle to the point where if he's your blind side, I can live with Drake May starting from this point if Brissett doesn't pick it up. Because Wallace did a lot better than I thought he would at left tackle against the Jets. He's mainly a right tackle at Penn State, but Elliot Wolf thought he could play left tackle. And look, Elliot Wolf looks like he was correct in that assessment because he did a decent job. He did a better job than Lowe did. I'm not saying he's the permanent left tackle. If you get Will Campbell, you can move him back to right tackle. But if you don't get Will Campbell or Kelvin Banks, you can make do with him at left tackle for another year. I'm thinking Drake May is going to start in week 5 because if the 49ers just blow out the Patriots like the Jets did and by a greater margin, and the Dolphins are playing Skylar Thompson, Tim Boyle, or Tyler Huntley. I think Huntley's literally the only one of those 3 that can go into New England and beat the Patriots if Drake May's starting. I do not think Skylar Thompson or Tim Boyle would beat Drake May. He did. He played against the Jets. Yeah. Yeah, so we'll see if that happens because Polk and Wallace look good as draft picks, as second and third round picks. Those guys look good. Even the fourth round pick, Lade Robinson's done well as a right guard with Sighty. So at left guard with Cole Strange out. So the New England's had to play a lot of their rookies a lot sooner than they'd like to. And I like Javon Baker. I think his ceiling might be higher than Polk's, but there's a reason he's not starting right now. Um, Hunter Henry, Austin Hooper, Jaheim Bell are the tight ends. Look, I like the Patriots defense, but last year the season-ending injuries to John Gonzalez crippled this defense. Only injury the Patriots have on defense right now, they have two. They have Barmore and Bentley. And look, Bentley is a higher floor than McMillan, 100 tackle seasons and a defensive captain. But I also think McMillan is a higher ceiling than Bentley, even though Bentley's more consistent and he has a better floor. But McMillan hasn't been horrible, but he hasn't been great either. But the 49ers, they do have some injuries. McCaffrey's still out. Debo Samuel's out. Kittle's out. Trent Williams is questionable for this week. Trent Williams may be out of this game with an injury. He's a game time decision. I like the 49ers, but I don't know if the spread should be minus 12. 85% of the public does have the Niners covering the 12-point spread. I'm going 28-13 49ers. With or without Trent Williams, I think they beat the Patriots by 15, even with all their injuries. I mean, they're just right now, 49ers are a lock on the site. And as good as the Patriots are, the Niners are just better. Even with all the injuries the Niners have, they're just a better team on paper than the Patriots right now. At this stage, they're a better team, and I just don't see Kyle Shanahan losing 3 in a row. So, I don't. I don't see Shanahan losing 3 in a row. Yeah, I've been watching Oklahoma State, Kansas State. This has not been a great game. I might tune into something else, but yeah, I mean, I enjoyed the Kentucky Georgia game last year. It was a defensive game, but that was at least entertaining as hell. A lot of the games this week just aren't entertaining. Like you have the USC Boise State game, you have the games in prime time. Okay, Garrett Oakley just scored for Kansas State. That game is somewhat entertaining again. Western Kentucky is beating Boston College. I might flip over to that game halftime, but yeah. Um, but yeah, the 49ers, everybody's got the Niners beating the Patriots. There's not really much to say. Um, Chiefs play the Chargers. I will check out some of the scores here. NC State only leads Northern Illinois by a touchdown. Syracuse only leads Holy Cross by a touchdown. Western Kentucky is beating Boston College. That game is over on the ACC network. So Western Kentucky is beating Boston College. I might have to check that out. So yeah, I will check that out. ACC Network because Western Kentucky is beating Bill O'Brien. I think that's pretty hilarious. I want to see how much longer this lasts. But yeah, Chiefs, Chargers. Chargers don't have Herbert. They don't have Rashawn Slater. They don't have Joe Alt. And they don't have Joey Bosa. So, and Sean Smith, who called the AFC Championship game, remember last year's AFC title game where the Chiefs did the Chiefs do anything controversial that wasn't penalized in the Ravens game last year in the AFC title? Well, same referee in last year's AFC Championship is calling the Chiefs Chargers game. So not only are the Chargers star players at quarterback, offensive tackle, and edge rusher out, they get the referee from last year's AFC title on top of that. And I think every week now, Oren is bitched about the Chiefs getting bailouts from the referees on a Utopia Football Insider. Yeah. So that should say something. But I like the Chiefs here. I think this is going to be a pretty ugly game. I've got the Chiefs winning by 2 touchdowns for the first time this year, 28-14. I mean, is there really anything else to say about this game with the Chargers' best players out? Doesn't feel like it. Interesting. Virginia Tech plays Pitt in men's soccer. Virginia Tech 17 and Pitt's number one. I didn't think Pitt was number one. If that's not on ACC Network, I might know because college Georgia. I have to miss Georgia Alabama to go to that game in person. I don't think that's worth it. I don't think I want to miss Georgia Alabama. It's not as much as I'd like to see Virginia Tech Pitt. One, I can get it on the ESPN app. I can get the game on the app. Number two, I just don't think Georgia, Alabama, this is going to be a hell of a game. It sucks that the game's at 7. I wish they aired the games a little earlier in the day, like at 3 or 4. That would be convenient as far as timing goes. But they're not going to do that with Pitt foot. I think Pitt football airs around the same time, so they're not going to air a soccer game when Pitt football's on. They're just not. Um, that's but like everybody's taking the Chiefs. Browns, Raiders. Um, this is Max Crosby and Adams are out. I think the Browns are going to win this one, and they're going to go to Washington with a 2-2 record. It feels like an elimination game for both the Browns and Raiders, Joey. Whoever loses this game falls to 1-3. Well, the Raiders, yeah, whoever loses this game is going to be 1-3. Um, I did I will make a case for why every 1-2 team will win the Super Bowl. Joey can make a case for why they won't. That was one thing I had planned for this show, but I'll do that after the predictions at the very end. But yeah, Browns, Raiders. Mayer's out too. Michael Mayer, the number 2 tight end to Brock Bowers, he's out too. Not as significant of an injury, but still a pretty big loss because it limits your offense to Brock Bowers and really nobody else. The running game, maybe. Bowers in the running game. Yeah. I thought Paxton Lynch was the porn star quarterback. I get it. He doesn't have the stamina Minshew has. I get it. That's cool. But that was a horrible pun, but you set me up for that one. I had the Browns winning this game by 2 touchdowns, 28-14 before the injury, but I had the Raiders beating the Broncos on the road in week 5, and I had them beating the Steelers in week 6. And now I don't even know if they beat either of those teams next week because now I got to monitor their damn injury report all week next week to find out if Crosby and Adams are going to play. Because if they're not playing against Denver or the Steelers, they're going to lose both of those games. Yeah. So the next game, you, me, and Tracy are the only ones that took the Browns. Orrin, Jason, Kerman, West took the Raiders, despite Crosby and Adams being injured. And I'm surprised none of them have changed their pick to the Browns. I would think with both of those guys out, at least one of those four would change their pick to the Browns. Not saying all four would change their pick. I'm saying at least one of those four would flip. You would think with the losses to Crosby and I like Jacoby Myers, but he's not going to do shit against Denzel Ward. Trey Tucker, I didn't like him coming out of Cincinnati, but he's not doing jack shit against Emerson. Whoever the Raiders' number 4 receiver is, he's not doing shit against Newsome. It's that simple. It's the type of matchup where Josh McDaniels laughs at the Raiders like Wario after Wario steals some gold from Mario. That's the type of matchup this is for the Raiders this week. And I don't want to see Josh McDaniels laughing at any NFL teams like Wario after his screw ups as a head coach, but that's how bad of a matchup this is for the Raiders. Josh McDaniels is somewhere in the outskirts laughing like Wario. What's funny is the Raiders had a deal in place with the Texans to get CJ Stroud, and McDaniels vetoed the deal. The Raiders and Texans had a draft day trade in place where the Raiders were going to get the Texans were going to get the 7th pick in the draft. A they were going to get the Texans' 2nd round pick, which was Michael Mayer, and they were going to get so the Texans would have gotten the Michael Mayer pick. They would have got the 7th pick. They would have gotten a 2024 first round pick, and they would have gotten a conditional 2025 second that became a first if Stroud won Rookie of the Year. So Texans and the Texans would have had three first round picks if Stroud had won Rookie of the Year on the Raiders. So that deal would have been beneficial for both teams, and it was McDaniels that vetoed the fucking trade. Both teams' GMs agreed to the trade. But McDaniel said, I'm not coaching this team unless you let me pick the quarterback. And the fucking Raiders caved into McDaniels. Yeah. With Tim Tebow. Yeah, and McDaniels got the guy who wanted Jimmy Garoppolo, and then they drafted a quarterback, but that didn't work out. So now McDaniels is out of Raider Nation. So yeah, they should have, but it is what it is. Bills are playing the Ravens. Look, I do think the Ravens are going to get their. I had Ravens Jets the beginning of the year. I'm starting to think it might be Ravens Bills now. The Bills just look really good. I think we're going to see the top four. Chiefs will be 1, Bills will be 2, Texans will be 3, Ravens will be 4, and Ravens will probably end up beating the Chiefs and the Bills on the road, and everyone will be like, "What the fuck?" That'll be the reaction if that happens. And then once that happens, the Ravens will win the Super Bowl. But they'll only do it once. And then it won't happen again. Because I don't know if Lamar has the hunger to win multiple championships. As good as he is, I don't see that hunger from him that I see from Mahomes, even Allen. Like, I feel like Allen's got the hunger to win 2 to 5 Super Bowls, but his supporting cast, it's not as good as what Mahomes or Jackson have at the moment. As good as Allen is, as much as he wants to will his team to victories, but I am going to take the Bills to win this game 27-23 Bills. Kerm is the only one who has the Ravens. So sorry, Edgar Allan Poe. Only the frog believes in you this weekend. Everyone else is taking the Bills to win. But yeah, the Bills. I think the Bills beat the Ravens 27-23. The over-under's 46. I think we see a high-scoring game. Thank God the Dolphins signed Tyler Huntley, Joey, because if they didn't, we were going to have to watch a Monday Night Football game of Will Levis versus Skylar Thompson or Will Levis versus Tim Boyle. Both those QBs played versus Seattle last week and both sucked. So the Dolphins signed Tyler Huntley off the Ravens practice squad. He had a rib injury and he didn't return to the game. That's the only reason Tim Boyle played last week. It's hard to believe that he tied Mason Rudolph in a game. Tim Boyle, because Goff was out with COVID. I think Ben was out with COVID too, and it was Mason Rudolph versus Boyle, and it was a tie game. It's almost like Tim Boyle showed Mike McDaniel a photo of him getting super drunk before his wedding, and he said, "This is going to go viral unless you sign me." And Mike McDaniel caved in and gave him a contract because I can't think of any other explanation to why Tim Boyle's on the Dolphins, Joey. If we were to make a list of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL, starters, backups, third stringers, I'm pretty sure the top two slots are reserved for Tim Boyle at number one and Nate Peterman at number two. I'm pretty sure the top two spots are reserved for those two gentlemen. And then spots 3 through 5, it's a clusterfuck of third string quarterbacks that we have to go through before we pick out who the next three guys are. I would put Zach Wilson at 3 and PJ Walker at 4, Joey. I'm not arguing with you on PJ Walker, but Zach Wilson. But when you compare Tim Boyle and Tim Boyle and Nate Peterman to Zach Wilson's just laughing at those two like Nelson Muntz on The Simpsons. You just threw an interception. Ha ha. That's I'm trying to think of who would be at number 5 on this list. Yeah, because I think the 4 I Wilson at 3 and Walker at 4. I'm just trying to figure out who would be number 5. That's the biggest challenge here. Who is legitimately the clear-cut 5th worst quarterback in the league? This is not easy. Well, can we put Daniel I wanna put Daniel Jones there, but I don't think he's the 5th worst. I mean, he's still starting on the team that drafted him. I don't even think I could say that about Will Levis, and none of our staff members at Draft Utopia liked Will Levis coming out of Kentucky. So, yeah, I mean, I heard he made a sex tape. I'm not gonna comment on that. I don't think it's appropriate to comment on that. I'm not gonna comment on that, but that's one thing I heard. What about Kenny Pickett? Can we put Kenny Pickett at 5 on this list? How do you feel about putting Kenny Pickett on this list at 5? Because I heard Tanner McKee beat him out for the backup job. Should we put Kenny Pickett on this list at 5? Or I think he would qualify for if we were ranking the 10 worst quarterbacks. I think he'd make the list. I'm not sure if he'll make the list at 5, but I don't know who else to put. Like, none of the other backups have been that brutally bad to the point where they warrant consideration. I can't say that about Tyson Bagent, who was good in the preseason. I can't say that about Brissett. I can't say that about even the Patriots backups, Joe Milton. I can't say that about Bailey Zappi. So, like, who else is there? Yeah. I'm trying to think of who would qualify for this list. I mean, really can't say anything bad about the other quarterbacks. I mean, Pickett's really the only other guy. Look at who's on the Ravens, Steelers, Bengals as backups, Browns. I can't really say anything bad about them that will qualify them. I can't really say anything bad about the AFC South quarterbacks that would qualify them. Can't really say anything bad about the AFC East backups. The Tyrod Taylor and Jordan Travis are the Jets backups and third stringers. Um, I guess it's basically between Skylar Thompson and Kenny Pickett, I guess, for that last spot. Those are really the only 2 guys that I can really make that argument for. Um, I think Mason Rudolph might be in the bottom 10 or bottom 15, but he's not in the bottom 5. Um, This is where it gets hard. You go through the NFC North division. There's not a quarterback in the bottom 5 in the NFC North. There's not a quarterback in the NFC South starter or backup that's in the bottom 5. Even as bad as Bryce Young started, even with Penix Kyle Trask. There's not the Saints quarterbacks. There's Cooper Rush might still be on Dallas. Trey Lance is on Dallas. I wouldn't put him in the bottom five. I wouldn't put what position is he? Um, Quarterback. So James Matt. Yeah, I'll pull up my Phil Steele magazine. Go to Conference US. Go to the Sun Belt Conference. Pull that up really quickly here and get some info on James Madison. Because I don't really have anything at James Madison at the top of my head, but one of the rumors I'm hearing is that here we go. I do have it. Quarterback is Dylan Morris. He's the quarter. James Madison lost their starting quarterback, but added Colorado State transfer who was at Player of the Year in Billy Adkins. They also that was in 22. But they add Dylan Morris, who started 15 of Washington's 16 games in 2020 and 2021. So Dylan Morris lost the starting quarterback job to Penix at Washington and then entered the portal. I think he started before Penix arrived, actually. And then after Penix came, he never started for Washington again. Yeah, I mean, James Madison dropped 70 on North Carolina last week. They are my de facto group of 5 team for the 12-team playoff right now. They are my you can make a case for UNLV, can make a case for Boise who's in the top 25, but James Madison's undefeated and they dropped 70 on North Carolina. So until they lose a game, they are my de facto group of 5 team for the playoff. Oh, I just thought of a third quarterback for the worst quarterback list. Clayton Tune. Remember the Cardinals quarterback that started against the Browns last year? I think he might be a challenger to both Kenny Pickett and the other quarterback. I forget who I was going to mention besides Kenny Pickett. Think we I think we found our winner. I think we found our winner for the bottom 5 quarterbacks, number 5. I think we found our winner. Clayton Tune. Any objections to that bottom 5 before we get to Titans Dolphins? Again, the bottom 5, number 1, Tim Boyle, number 2, Nate Peterman, number 3, Zach Wilson, number 4, PJ Walker, and number 5, Clayton Tune. I think we agree that's the bottom 5. Yep. It's a good bottom 5 if you're trying to find the 5 worst quarterbacks. It's a bad bottom 5 if that's your strategy for building a team. But yeah, Titans, Dolphins. I'm going to take the Dolphins here. They're starting Tyler Huntley. Skylar Thompson's the backup. Tim Boyle will not touch that gridiron with a 10-foot pole. Um, I like the Dolphins 20-16. The Ravens added him to their practice squad after the Browns cut him, but then the Dolphins picked him up off the Ravens practice squad. So yeah, yep. I like the Dolphins in this one. Will Levis, he beat the Dolphins at with Tua last year on Monday Night Football. This year he loses to the Dolphins, and I think we see I think Levis gets benched for Mason Rudolph. I do, because I've seen enough bad plays from Will Levis to where if you're going to bench Bryce Young, but you're not going to bench Will Levis, I'm beginning to question what you're doing, Tennessee. I do. It's Will Levis, and Tony Mario found a great stat. JC Latham, the 7th pick in the draft, has already surrendered 6 sacks in the first 3 games. That is most in the NFL. That is the big reason why he's ranked 59 out of 60 offensive tackles. Um, yeah, he's allowed 6 sacks in 3 starts. He gave up 3 sacks to Will McDonald, and he gave up, 3 more sacks in week 3 when the Titans lost to the, Titans. Who they play? Packers. He gave up 3 sacks to the Packers in week 3, and he gave up 3 sacks to the Jets. So he's surrendered 6 sacks on the year in 3 games. That's the most in the NFL. And he was the 7th pick in the draft. I mean, the Titans scouts wanted Olu Fashanu. They wanted Olu Fashanu, but the Titans had 2 guys on their board. Rand Carthen had 2 guys on his board, Malik Neighbors and Joe Alton. They both went 5th and 6th. So instead of listening to scouts, he basically listened to Callahan, who wanted Latham, and it just hasn't worked out. And I like Latham, but I'm at the point where if you can trade for Kirk Cousins, even if it means moving Levis and Traylon Burks and some second and fifth round picks in a package deal to Atlanta, you trade for Cousins and you draft Will Campbell and you move Latham back to right tackle. That's what you do. I think that's the only way the Titans can turn this around at this point. That's just where I'm at, Joey. Well, Latham played right tackle at Alabama. He never played left tackle in high school or college. They just threw him to the wolves. And look, if you draft Will Campbell, you kill 3 birds with 1 stone on the offensive line. You move Latham back to right tackle, and Nicholas Petit-Frere, who had a good rookie year, suspended year 2, has sucked in year 3. He might find his calling card at right guard because he's been terrible at right tackle the last 3 years. He was promising enough at right tackle to get a shot at left tackle, but he screwed that up. And then he got suspended. Now he sucks at right tackle. So if the Titans, both their right guards are going to be UFAs. You could try Petit Frere at right guard during the final year of his rookie deal, see if you've got something. And you can kill 3 birds with 1 stone just by drafting Will Campbell, but you got to have a quarterback to trade for. And I think right now, realistically, the only option is Kirk Cousins, and it's probably going to take 2 second, 2 fifth round picks, Levis and Traylon Burks. That's probably the minimum asking price, and the Falcons might want more than that. But that's the minimum asking price to at least get a conversation going. because the Titans have a left guard and center that's good, but they don't have a right guard. They don't have, and both their tackles suck right now. So if I'm doing the simulator next week, I'm probably, and I'm the Titans, I'm probably going to figure out how can I get Will Campbell and get a veteran quarterback. That's probably the best way to be competitive because if you do that, you could be the second best team in the division behind Houston. With the way Richardson and Lawrence have started, he's only on a 1-year contract though, and the Titans might not renew him next season. That's the thing. I'm not arguing with you on Rudolph, but he's on a 1-year contract, so Titans may not bring him back after the season. So I think if you're the Titans, we'll see. But yeah, we're all only Jason, West, and Oren took the Titans. I can't believe Oren said that Will Levis is better than Gardner Minshew last week. That's probably why the Raiders lost to the Panthers. I looked at Oren and he was like, "Seriously, bro? You're gonna say that Levis is better than Minshew? Seriously, bro?" And then Andy Dalton beats the Raiders. That's how it went down. I'm kidding. I don't know what God's thinking, but yeah, Seahawks, Lions. Seahawks have some players out with injuries. Uchenna Nwosu, Boy Mafe did not practice this week. Jerome Baker did not practice this week, and Dotson. So not only are both outside linebackers potentially out, both inside linebackers could be out as well. Because Boy Mafe, Uchenna Nwosu, and Jerome Baker are all questionable, but none of them practiced the first 2 days of the week. So if they don't practice today, they're out against the Lions. Yeah, I've switched over to ACC Network because Western Kentucky was beating Boston College. I think it's hilarious that Western Kentucky's beating Bill O'Brien by double digits after he beat Florida State. Holy shit, Western Kentucky just forced a fumble against Boston College. And now they have a chance to go up by 17 against Bill O'Brien. I swear, this fumble that Western Kentucky just forced, it looks like something straight from Greg Cosell's NFL Football Follies. That's how bad of a play that was. That Boston College fumble looked like something that Greg Cosell would commentate on NFL Football Follies. If you've ever seen that on NFL Network, uh, shit. But yeah, I mean, Seahawks, all their linebackers are injured. Detroit's pretty much healthy for the most part. Leonard Williams is out. Byron Murphy is out. Both right tackles injured. Walker's injured. The Lions have a fully healthy team for the most part. I like the Lions by a touchdown, 24-17. Joey and Oren did pick Seattle. I'll let Joey make his argument for Seattle, and then I'm going to wrap up the show by making an argument for every 1 and 2 team winning Super Bowl 59 because it's been 12 years since Super Bowls in New Orleans. I think a 1 and 2 team will win the Super Bowl this year, so I'm going to make an argument for every single team winning Super Bowl 59, and Joey can make a counter argument for why that team won't win Super Bowl 59, which means you'll get to hear Joey make a rare Browns take on why the Browns won't win the Super Bowl. So that'll be at the very end here, but first break down why you got Seattle over Detroit. Yep. Yep. I mean, I've got Detroit winning, but I think it's going to be a close game. I think one of the two 3-0 NFC teams is going to be 4-0. I don't I don't think both NFC teams win, but I've got the Vikings starting 4-0. You've got the Seahawks starting 4-0. So we agree one of the two NFC teams is going to be the sole survivor at 4-0 in the conference entering week 5. We at least agree that much. Okay. Now before we wrap this up, we are going to do a little rant video on why each 1 and 2 team will win Super Bowl 59. And that includes every single 1 and 2 team in the league. That does not include the Cowboys and Giants who played on Thursday night because Cowboys are 2-2, Giants are 1-3. So those teams will be excluded from this. Why will the Baltimore and Joey is free to make a counter argument for why I'm wrong on each team if he wishes to. If he doesn't, my argument for the Ravens is pretty simple. They have Lamar Jackson, they have Zay Flowers, Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely. Ronnie Stanley's one of the best left tackles in the league. They've got Linderbaum at center. I know stability on the offensive line. Voorhees looked good at times. Um, right guard, they've started Falele. They started Macari, I think, at right tackle, and they've got Falele at right guard. I like their defense. I like their defensive coordinator, Zach Orr. Roquan Smith's one of the best linebackers in the game. Their cornerback room, they're so deep at corner, it's not even funny. Marlon Humphrey, Brandon Stevens. They're going to have their nickel corner coming back in a few weeks from injured reserve, but they've got Nate Wiggins. I think their secondary is incredible. They've got John Harbaugh. I think the Ravens are legit one of the better teams in the league, but they've got a brutal strength of schedule to start the year. I think they're going to get hot in the second half, and they're going to ride that momentum into the playoffs all the way to New Orleans. That's my argument for the Ravens winning Super Bowl 59. If you've got a counter argument, you're free to share it on why each 1 and 2 team won't win the Super Bowl. And then we'll go to your Browns. Yeah. All right. Next up's the Browns. Why will the Browns win the Super Bowl? None of their big players on defense have been out due to injuries yet. Yeah, Miles Garrett's playing through an injury. He's not 100%. I get that. But none of the Browns' defensive starters from last year and this year have missed games due to injuries yet. So that's an argument for the Browns. And even though the offense is clustered with injuries at the moment, I don't see an injury to where it's a deal breaker for the Browns. I think Njoku will probably be back by week 5 or 6. Nick Chubb should be back pretty soon. Offensive tackle is problematic, but the Browns are stuck in a situation where they kind of have to play with the cards they're dealt because I don't think they're going to be picking high enough in the draft to get a Will Campbell or Kelvin Banks. So it's either pay Wills or overpay a free agent or trade for somebody. And none of those options are really very enticing if you can't get the tackle you want in the draft. And it just feels like a lose-lose proposition no matter what Barry does right now at the tackle spot. But I think the Browns, if they're healthy in the second half, they can do something. And their schedule's manageable to where they're going to win at least 9 games, even with all the crap they got. They do get the Commanders and Eagles on the road after they play the Raiders. I do think they beat the Bengals and Ravens at home. I've got them losing to the Chargers before the bye, but after that bye week, they get the Saints, Steelers on Thursday night at home, and the Broncos. I think they win all of those games on Monday Night Football against Bo Nix. Then they got to go on the road to Pittsburgh. They got to play Kansas City at home. I actually have them beating the Chiefs. They're one of two teams to beat the Chiefs this year. I have them beating the Dolphins. I think if the Browns can steal a road win from the Steelers, Ravens, or Bengals, that will get them in the playoffs. And, if the Browns can get through, let's say the Browns knock out the Chiefs, if they can avoid Buffalo and they get the Texans in the AFC Championship, I think that's a scenario where it becomes a lot more winnable. And that's really the only path the Browns have to the Super Bowl, Joey, is they would have to beat the Chiefs. Mahomes gets injured again. They beat the Chiefs, and then they draw the Texans in the AFC Championship. That is legitimately the only scenario where I can see the Browns in the Super Bowl. Because I think on paper, when healthy, the Ravens are a better team than the Browns, but I'm making an argument for your Browns. Despite how I feel about the situation, I am making that argument. If you want to make a counter argument for why your Browns won't win the Super Bowl, now is the time to speak up. Otherwise, I will go to the AFC South division. Why will the Indianapolis Colts win the Super Bowl? They have the number one pass blocking offensive line, according to Pro Football Focus. Unlike the last 2 years, their offensive line has not suffered any injuries yet. I don't remember the last time all five starters in the Colts offensive line had zero injuries for an entire season. It feels like either Braden Smith or Ryan Kelly goes down every other year with something. But this is and when those two were healthy, the Colts really didn't have a left tackle after Costanzo retired. So now they have everything you want on the offensive line. They have their weapons. Richardson's got to step up and be the man. He hasn't been that yet, but the front seven's really good when everyone's healthy. I think their secondary sucks, but if Anthony Richardson can step up, they've got a shot. I mean, this is hard. Making an argument for the freaking Colts, this is hard. But if Jonathan Taylor finishes number one in rushing yards, his offensive line's number one in pass blocking, and Richardson actually steps up and mans up, I think the Colts have a chance. This is really hard, though. 1 and 2 teams. I believe the Dolphins and the Patriots are both 1 and 2, Joey. So the argument for the Dolphins winning the Super Bowl, everybody comes back. They're fully healthy. They do just enough to get into the playoffs, and then the Dolphins just go on a historic road run, and they somehow find themselves in the Super Bowl against Minnesota or Seattle. And then Mike McDaniel performs some voodoo magic trick to make Sam Darnold see ghosts, and the Dolphins win the Super Bowl against the Vikings. The next scenario involves the Patriots winning the Super Bowl. This is not happening, but Drake May is named the starting quarterback. Rob Kraft gets on his knees and begs Bill Belichick to come back. and the Patriots go on a frickin' tear with Drake May and Belichick. This is not going to happen, by the way. But yeah, I don't see any scenario where my Patriots win the Super Bowl this year. I'm sorry, I don't. I hope I'm wrong, but I don't think I am. Patriots just suck this year. It is what it is. Um, the Broncos. Why will the Broncos win the Super Bowl? Well, they have Patrick Surtain, one of the best corners in the league. He's been on fire. Nobody's had 30 receiving yards on him so far this season. He continues to dominate at corner. The Broncos front seven steps up, and it allows Bo Nix to manage the game effectively. And why will the Raiders win the Super Bowl? They have weapons for Gardner Minshew. They have Max Crosby. They've got a good cornerback tandem of Nate Hobbs and Jack Jones. Jack Jones can't keep his head on straight consistently. When he keeps his head on straight, he's a top 15 corner. When he doesn't, he's a bottom 5 corner. So that's the argument for the Raiders. They do have two good linebackers in Spillane and Divine Diablo, who's out this week. In addition to Crosby, they have Wilkins. They have some guys that can play. All those guys have to step up for the Raiders to have any shot of winning the Super Bowl. Let's be real, Joey. Why will the Bears win the Super Bowl? They're the only team in the NFL without any injuries at the moment at all 22 positions. That's really the only argument I can make for the Bears. That and Caleb Williams balling out, winning Offensive Rookie of the Year like Stroud. Those things have to happen, and the Bears have to stay healthy. That's really the only argument you can make for the Bears winning the Super Bowl. Let's be real. They're not winning the Super Bowl, but I'm trying to be positive about every 1 and 2 team winning the Super Bowl. And I'm failing miserably. Next division, we have the Panthers. Andy Dalton just continues to go on a Herculean run. And as quarterback, he continues to dominate each week. It gets to the tipping point where Roger Goodell dyes his hair red and hands Andy Dalton the Super Bowl trophy after the Panthers win their first Super Bowl. Afterwards, Dave Tepper sells the Carolina Panthers to bar rescue consultant John Taffer, who I think that would probably be the only scenario where the Panthers win the Super Bowl, Joey. Dave Tepper sells the Carolina Panthers to bar rescue owner John Taffer, and he's able to turn around the shit show that Dave Tepper has caused. That's really the only scenario where I can see the Panthers winning the Super Bowl. I mean, that just says a lot about how bad of an owner Dave Tepper is. NFC East. Well, there's not a 1 and 3 team in the NFC East. NFC West. I can make a counter argument for the Cardinals, the 49ers, and the Rams. My argument for the Cardinals winning the Super Bowl. Marvin Harrison Jr., Trey McBride, and James Conner, they go into Kyler Murray's house and they smash the Call of Duty disc with a baseball bat like the IT guys in Office Space. The coaches do the same thing and smash his Xbox. This angers Kyler Murray to the point where he goes on a rager and dominates the rest of the league. And then after the Cardinals win the Super Bowl, they promise Kyler Murray a Call of Duty themed bachelor party before his wedding if he wins the big game. He leads the Cardinals to the big game in a Super Bowl win over the Ravens. And afterwards, Kyler Murray becomes the first quarterback in NFL history to turn down the Super Bowl presentation as he is playing Call of Duty in the locker room as the Cardinals are presented the Super Bowl trophy. Roger Goodell has to hand the Super Bowl trophy to Marvin Harrison Jr. due to Kyler Murray's passion for Call of Duty. Yeah, this is easily the most fucked up scenario of the Super Bowl winning scenarios for 1 and 2 teams, but it's probably the most entertaining scenario as well, Joey. With I mean, you have to admit that's a pretty entertaining scenario. You have to admit that is a good scenario for Kyler Murray. But yeah, the card. Yeah. All right, 49ers. Why will they win the Super Bowl? If their weapons are healthy and they get enough wins to make the playoffs, anything can happen at that point. They know they've been to the Super Bowl twice. They know what it takes to be there. I know they had to get the one seed on both occasions. They made the Super Bowl under Kyle Shanahan. They were the one seed. They're probably not going to get the one seed this year, but if they're healthy by the time the playoffs start, McCaffrey comes back, they could go on another run to the Super Bowl. And the argument for the Rams, same as the 49ers. They got to have all their guys healthy in January, but if they do, they can go on a run and maybe Matthew Stafford gets another Super Bowl ring. But yeah, that would be the are there any other 1 and 2 teams you wanna make a counter argument for? Because I know most of these scenarios after the Ravens, the Browns, the 49ers, the Rams, after those 4 teams, a lot of these scenarios are unrealistic to the point where they're just borderline laughable or ridiculous, the scenarios, at least, that I'm pitching. But this is basically a satire video. This is basically an idea. This is basically a I feel like this is a Angie Angar, Benchwarmer Bram, Tom Grossi type video where you make an argument for every 1 and 2 team winning the Super Bowl. That's basically what this was, but it was very poorly executed on my part. Outside of the 4 teams at 1 and 2 that actually have a chance, the Ravens, the Browns, the 49ers, the Rams, outside of those 4, I just don't it's just not realistic or conceivable. But yeah, it's 2-11. Yeah, yeah, pretty much. Yeah, pretty much. Um, there are some exciting college football games tonight. Georgia Tech plays at Georgia. I can't believe I said Georgia Tech. I meant to say the Georgia Bulldogs take on the Alabama Crimson Tide. That is on 8 p.m. Eastern on ABC. This is you know there's a lot of good games today. Kentucky's playing Ole Miss. Really, the Big Ten Network's going to air a college soccer game when college football is on. Okay. I don't know why you don't air games on Fridays, but you air a game on Saturday when college football is on. That makes zero sense from a rating standpoint. But hey, I'm not judging. Um, but yeah, they made a 30 for 30 about the Vancouver Canucks riot after they lost the Stanley Cup to Boston. That's on ESPN News at 2 p.m. at 3 or 4 p.m. today. So yeah, but yeah, they're it feels weird seeing the SEC on ESPN. ESPN paid for the cable rights. I'm not going to complain. I actually enjoy watching Herb Street and Chris Fowler break down the games. I also enjoy Ben Kirk's dog, so I'm not going to complain about that. But CBS just isn't what it used to be with the Big 10 games on at 3:30. It's just not. I mean, they're not even getting good Big Ten games. They're getting leftovers because Fox gets the good Big Ten games, and sometimes Peacock will get a good Big Ten game too, Joey. So CBS is basically getting leftovers for the Big Ten, and they're accepting it. And it's just not a good deal for CBS. They got to have the premier game at 3:30. If they were getting a premier game, but that's the thing. Ohio State, Michigan's always going to be on Fox. That's the premier Big Ten game. That's always going to be on Big Noon Kickoff and Fox at noon. It just is. That's so. I mean, Wisconsin USC isn't a bad game, but it's not an exciting game either. Illinois Penn State's on NBC. That's a premier Big Ten game. That should be on CBS. Number 9 versus number 19, but CBS scheduled Wisconsin USC because they figured that game would have more implications on the playoff. And NBC got Illinois Penn State. So good job by NBC getting that one. But yeah, we will be back next week. Next week we'll have an MLB playoff picture. We will have fullback rankings. We'll wrap up the final NHL division, the Pacific Division. I'll reveal whether Edmonton or Dallas is my cup winner. It's one of those two. I think whoever comes out of the West is going to have a very good chance to beat whoever comes out of the East this year. Even if Florida gets back, there's not a team in the East. It's a very unimpressive East this year. I mean, I think there's at least 4 or 5 teams in the West that could beat the Eastern champion. That includes Nashville and Colorado. And Joey agreed with me, so that should say a lot. But yeah, it's just I don't know. I think Florida, the Rangers, or Toronto would have to draw a really weak team in the Eastern Conference, like the Vancouver Canucks or the LA Kings. That's really the only way I can see the East winning the cup again. But yeah, we'll have fullback rankings, top 5 fullbacks next week. We'll have a Pacific Division for the NHL. We'll have the MLB playoffs, ALDS and NLDS predictions. We'll have we're going to have midseason report cards. Titans, Chargers, Eagles, and Lions are on buys. I will be picking for the Lions and Titans. Joey will be picking for the Chargers and Eagles. And we will load up the simulator. We'll break down the free agents for those 4 teams, and we'll load up the simulator before we pick our winners for Week 5. But I already have the Week 5 webpage coded, Joey. So, yeah, my work for next week's pretty much done. I can pretty much relax the rest of today and have fun and promote this podcast and live stream. So that's pretty much it. Anything you want to say to our audience before we sign off? All right, that'll do it. That's Joseph Potter. I'm Chris Ransom. We'll see you guys next Saturday. And thank you for